Hey, it's Miles Galloway, and it's time for a new season of Encore. Wait, let me do that again.
Hey, I'm Ruby Carr, your brand new host of Encore, and I am so excited to be kicking off this new season with one of my all-time favorite songs. This is the story of Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way.
You know the songs.
Just making people feel something.
It's been a pleasure to work on this song with her.
But do you know the history?
It's a struggle making any kind of record.
I don't always have the direction or concept.
This is Encore, an in-depth look at the stories behind the music. Here's iHeartRadio's Ruby Carr.
Boy bands. They really don't get much credit for being musicians, performers, and entertainers. But from the Jackson 5 in the mid-1960s to the current global phenomenon that is K-pop, boy bands have been a huge moneymaker in music for decades now. At the same time, though, they have also been subjected to plenty of ridicule, disparagement, and even hatred. I went to see Backstreet Boys a few years ago, and they took out their instruments and said, whoa, we're the Backstreet Boys. We're not supposed to have instruments. So even they get in on the joke. I mean, I get it. The boy band was essentially a music industry creation with the sole purpose of capitalizing on the love and devotion of young girls and their allowances, and they were good at that. Do you remember the Cat Street Boys shirt from Northern Getaway? That was fire. I wish I still had it. Anyway, the boys in these bands were almost always reduced to being puppets, to just sing and dance to the music that was mostly written, recorded, and, to use a dirty industry term, manufactured by professional songwriters and musicians. This music was designed to be a perfect product that girls of the tween and teen variety just could not resist. And how could we? Dreamy boys singing sickly sweet pop songs about being in love while they maneuver synchronized, choreographed dance moves? Irresistible, but not exactly something that appealed to all demographics. However, there is one song that goes against the grain, that breaks all of the rules, and for the past quarter century has been an exception to everything I just said. It is a song that had the likes of grown men like Adam Sandler, Paul Rudd, Jerry Seinfeld, and John Hamm singing along to it on live television like true stans when it was performed at the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary concert this past February. It has been used countless times in movies and TV shows. Shout out to that amazing opening scene in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Literal chills. It has been covered, sampled, and parodied to no end. Let's face it, because you can't deny it, it is the one true boy band song that virtually everyone on earth gives a pass to. No, you know what? It's more than that. It is a song that everyone flat out loves, whether they will admit it or not. And that song is I Want It That Way by Backstreet Boys.
Hi, we're the Backstreet Boys.
The top-selling boy band of all time, the Backstreet Boys!
Please welcome the Backstreet Boys!
To quote Rolling Stone, it is a genre-transcending classic. The story of Backstreet Boys began in Orlando, Florida in the early 1990s and actually involves a blimp hanger. Yes, I said a blimp hanger. Despite accusations of being a manufactured pop group, the members of Backstreet Boys knew each other before they were officially brought together by manager Lou Pearlman. Howie Dorough and AJ McLean first met as teenagers through a shared vocal coach. Both would attend auditions where they met a younger, aspiring singer by the name of Nick Carter. The three soon discovered that they could pull off some serious harmonizing together, and they began to sing with each other. Meanwhile, a pair of cousins in Lexington, Kentucky, named Kevin Richardson and Brian Luttrell, had grown up singing in church choirs and local concerts since they were kids. Kevin would leave Kentucky to go work at Disney World in Orlando as a tour guide and focus on his music. In 1992, Pearlman placed an ad in the Orlando Sentinel looking to put together a musical group of teenage boys with, quote, the look of New Kids on the Block and the sound of Boys to Men. Not creepy at all, Lou. One of the first people to reply was the mother of AJ McLean, who arranged for her son to audition for Pearlman in the music mogul's living room. AJ impressed Pearlman, and he was invited to be the first member of the group. Not long after, he held an open casting call for singers and dancers at his, blimp hangar in Kissimmee, Florida. Sorry, but I think I need to point out that Lou Pearlman had possession of a blimp hangar because he owned Airship International Ltd., a manufacturer of non-rigid airships, otherwise known as blimps. But I digress. Perlman was so impressed by what he heard from Kevin, Nick, Howie, and another singer named Buck Parsons that he invited them to join AJ in the group, which was christened Backstreet Boys, as a tribute to the city of Orlando's Backstreet Flea Market. While the group's members were decided, they weren't final. A few months in, Buck Parsons decided to leave the group. Years later, in a blog post, he would write, "After several months of living the life of an up-and-coming pop music star, 1 week before our first photo shoot, I walked into the office of our manager and quit. I told him very simply that I was not called to be an entertainer, but that I believed God was calling me to be a minister." Parsons would also claim that 2 years later, Perlman approached him to join another boy band he was assembling called NSYNC, but once again he decided to follow his faith. After learning of Parsons' departure, Kevin called up his cousin Brian and told him to fly into Orlando to audition. On April 20th, 1993, Brian Luttrell was officially named the fifth and final member of Backstreet Boys, a date that would forever be marked as the group's day of birth. Now, before I go any further, I might as well point out something obvious. Some of the members, like Kevin and Howie, were already men in their 20s at this point, so you may be asking yourselves, why did they go with Backstreet Boys over Backstreet Men, or less age-specific Backstreet Guys or Backstreet Dudes? Well, it's most likely because alliteration works when you're trying to sell a product, and, those other names are ridiculous. But years later, AJ would explain the main reason, telling the Chicago Tribune, "Boys is kind of like a slang term. You've got the Beach Boys, they're in their 50s and 60s, and they're still boys. So we'll always be Backstreet Boys for the duration of this group." And there you have it. Almost immediately, the boys were put to the test. Just 2 weeks after forming, they played their first official concert on May 8th, 1993 at SeaWorld, of all places. It was grad night. Perlman brought in Johnny and Donna Wright, a couple of pro managers, to handle the day-to-day schedule of the group. They performed at amusement parks, fairs, schools, and malls around Florida to help build up their chemistry and fan base. Mercury Records showed some interest in signing Backstreet Boys. However, their artist John Mellencamp allegedly threatened to leave Mercury if his label began signing boy bands. Wow, John, not cool. But not long after, Backstreet Boys impressed record execs at Jive Records after performing at a high school in Cleveland and signed the group then and there. Within a year of forming, Backstreet Boys had a record deal and were on their way to becoming superstars. But it wouldn't happen overnight. In June 1995, the members of Backstreet Boys flew to Stockholm, Sweden to work at Chiron Studios with producer Dennis Pop, not his real name, and his protege, a young rock musician turned producer named Max Martin, who had achieved some success with homegrown pop act Ace of Base. To the boys, these Swedes looked like, quote, heavy metal guys plucked out of Metallica, but they were ready to help. Along with British songwriter Herbert Critchlow, Pop and Martin had written a song for the young boy band called We've Got It Going On, a cocky dance pop track they felt would serve as a proper introduction. They ran into a problem when 15-year-old Nick was unable to sing because he was right in the middle of puberty and his voice was changing at the time. He would tell Billboard, "I was definitely going through puberty at the time. My voice, where it was at, was good for certain songs, but then other ones not so much. It was a very strange time for me." But it only took the boys 2 days to record the song, leaving them with more studio time than they needed. Luckily, Pop and Martin had another song ready for them to record called Quit Playing Games with My Heart. Once again, Nick wasn't able to contribute vocals, so Brian sang both verses himself. A few things about that. The song would initially be released as a single and on the album featuring Brian singing the verses. However, in the video, Nick lip-syncs to Brian's voice. It wasn't until a year later that Max Martin would fly over to Los Angeles to record Nick's part of the song. Eventually, this version of the song would be included on the re-releases of the first Backstreet Boys albums. And because the other members were tired and had gone back to the hotel, the only voices to appear on Quit Playing Games with My Heart were those of Kevin and Brian. Their label, Jive, decided that the first single should be We've Got It Going On, a song that had some zest to it. They sent it out to radio stations worldwide in August 1995, followed by a single release in stores the following month, and it virtually did nothing at home in the U.S. As Howie would tell Billboard, at the time, there wasn't any group like us out there. Before us was the New Kids on the Block, and we were told by several people that there was a backlash that came about after them, that radio didn't want another group of a bunch of boys. The term boy band was created over in Europe, and we were scared of that coming across to America with us, which inevitably it did. We always wanted just to be considered a vocal harmony group. But that's not how Americans saw them, and the lukewarm response to We've Got It Going On sure seemed like America didn't care about boy bands, that they were a thing of the past. But a funny thing happened with Backstreet Boys. Other countries cared. Europe still loved them some boy bands, and the song climbed the charts in countries like France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and even the UK. Radio programmers in Canada heard about this and began playing Backstreet Boys too, especially in Quebec. In fact, it is widely suggested that CJFM, a radio station in Montreal, back then known as Mix 96 and now Virgin 95.9, helped break Backstreet Boys in North America. But while they were being ignored back home in the US, Backstreet Boys were blowing up in Europe, especially Germany, where their second single, I'll Never Break Your Heart, had gone gold, selling more than 250,000 copies. German fans couldn't get enough of Backstreet Boys and voted them the favorite international group of the year. Here they are appearing on Viva Germany, a free-to-air music channel where they introduce themselves and just how young they were.
My name is AJ, and I'm 17.
And I'm Brian, and I'm 20.
I'm Kevin, and I'm 23.
I'm Howie D, and I'm 21.
I'm Nick, and I'm 15.
15? Shit! 15 Jahre alt, Nick. And what about school? I mean...
We'll have a tutor come on the road with us, which is a qualified teacher.
Yeah.
And then our records will be sent back to the school.
This would suck for them, too, because you could just imagine them trying to brag about their success to their friends, and they'd be like, we're really big in Germany. Yeah, sure you are, Nick. A couple more singles followed, Get Down, You're the One for Me, and Quit Playing Games with My Heart, which were followed by their self-titled debut album in early 1996. Released in every country but Canada and the US, Backstreet Boys, the album, later nicknamed the Red Album, would go platinum and immediately sell 500,000 copies in, you guessed it, Germany. Just before they released the album in Canada, Backstreet Boys played their first Canadian concert at the International Balloon Festival in Quebec, which, if you didn't know, is Canada's largest hot air balloon festival. When the boys took the stage, they were shocked to see 85,000 people singing along to their songs. Years later, A.J. McLean would tell the Huffington Post, "It was really groundbreaking for us. We used to come back to the U.S. and call it no fan land because we would go from being on tour in Europe for thousands of people to coming home to no one. But we had been focusing a lot on France, which is where it started to leak back to the French-speaking provinces of Canada. Then slowly it made its way to Toronto and filtered down into the U.S. Detroit, New York, and Chicago were some of the first U.S. cities to play us on the radio, and I know it leaked down from their friends upstate in Canada. So Canada holds a really special place for us because it was a huge asset in infiltrating the Backstreet Boys into the U.S. Backstreet Boys would spend the end of 1996 and the beginning of 1997 touring across Quebec, eventually leading them to their first show in Toronto. That same day in January, they would make their first of many visits to the Much Music Building, where many screaming Canadian fans were waiting for them.
Everybody, you're watching us at Much with a big buzz. There's a lot of excitement here in the environment. You know why? I'll tell you why. The Backstreet Boys are here. They're going to be performing live for the first time ever in Much Music.
Speaking to VJ Rick Campanelli, the boys discussed how frenzied the response had been in Canada.
I read the girls fainting when you were in, was it Quebec last year at a mall? Doing something at a mall that 10 girls fainted. And
we made the headlines just on that.
Yeah. Just on that. Yeah. It's amazing. And you're huge in Quebec. You're getting, people are starting to pick up on you all across Canada from coast to coast. Yeah. But I think you've sold 500,000 in Canada. Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
That's pretty good.
And 350 of those have been sold in Quebec.
Yeah.
Amazing. What draws the French people to the Backstreet Boys?
Well, I think with our music, it started in Europe, and I think it came from France and the magazines and stuff, and that's how it came to Quebec first before it got everywhere else.
Exactly.
Because we've been so busy in Europe, we haven't even had a chance to promote in the United States yet, and that's what we're getting ready to do next.
It hasn't been released in the States yet?
Not yet.
Soon?
Yes, March.
This year, March?
This spring. We're still recording, actually, for the album for the States.
Unfortunately for the group, the album release in the U.S. would be pushed back for many months. In fact, the Red album would never receive a proper release in the States. But the boys kept their momentum going by touring across Europe and Canada over the first half of 1997. Backstreet Boys were becoming the biggest thing in music for young Canadian girls thanks to the constant airplay on Much Music. The impact the nation's music station had on the rise of Backstreet Boys in Canada did not go unnoticed by the group. AJ would tell the Huffington Post about one major appearance they made, saying, "We surprised all our moms by flying them out." The TV station was in the middle of downtown Toronto, and 15 to 20,000 fans showed up. They were in the streets surrounding the building, and there were pictures, autographs, screaming, crying. It was such an overwhelming feeling of, wow, this is actually happening. And that was a moment in Backstreet history I don't think any of us will forget.
One more time, let's hear it for the Backstreet Boys. Come on, let's hear it. Yes.
As Jive and Backstreet Boys were gearing up to reintroduce the group to the U.S. market, the label suggested they put out a new song written and produced by super producer Mutt Lange called If You Want to Be a Good Girl, Get Yourself a Bad Boy as the first single from the new version of their album. However, the boys disagreed with the label and argued against the song, which they felt was one of the worst ones they had recorded. While the song would still end up on the album, in April they released Quit Playing Games with My Heart, now featuring Nick, which would eventually become a huge hit for them, reaching number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. To date, it's Backstreet Boys' highest charting song ever, which means yes, they have never had a number 1 hit in America. Isn't that mind-blowing? My mind is blown. They may have been number 2 on the charts, but they were number 1 in our hearts.
Yeah, we're going to do a little bit more R&B because the style of music, the mainstream in America, is a little bit more R&B as comparison to Europe and some other places where it's more pop-oriented.
Fantastic.
So we'll have like producers like Babyface, PM Dawn.
Really?
Yeah, some good tracks.
That was Howie during a Much Music interview in early 1997, explaining what the plan was for Backstreet Boys and the release of their first album in the U.S. Now, there has always been a bit of confusion over what happened with Backstreet Boys and their first album in the United States. As I mentioned earlier, when they first debuted and released We've Got It Going On, the song tanked in their home country. Their label Jive immediately put plans on hold for the group in America and focused on breaking the group in virtually every other country in the world. But come 1997, a plan was in place. Backstreet would record some new songs, and Jive would repackage their debut album as an exclusive release just for American fans. But here's where the confusion comes in. At the same time they were looking to release this different version of their self-titled album, Jive had another new album by the group to release everywhere else. So instead of just putting out their second album, Backstreet's Back, the label basically took the best songs from their first 2 albums and made them into a compilation for the US. 6 songs from the 1996 Backstreet Boys album and 5 from Backstreet's Back. Still with me? To make matters even more confusing, both the US and international albums had the same image of the group on the cover. Wait, there's more. The first single from the album was a brand new song called Everybody, Backstreet's Back. You know the dance. It became a massive hit and had a cool Halloween-y video where Brian was a werewolf, Howie was a vampire, and Kevin was like either Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or Two-Face from Batman, not sure. But there was resistance about releasing a song where Backstreet's proclaiming that they're back when in the US, they were really only introducing themselves. So Jive released it as a single worldwide, but not immediately in the US, because Everybody Backstreet's Back was left off of the US version of the album. So tough luck for all of the American fans who bought the album for that song. Naturally, when the song became a big hit in Canada, it started getting airplay on radio stations in all of the border cities, and eventually Jive released it as a single in the US, while later adding it to the album after it had sold out of its first million copies. Thanks to the success of bubblegum pop groups like Spice Girls and Hanson, Backstreet Boys experienced phenomenal success once they were properly introduced to the United States market. In the summer of 1997, Kitty Bopper music was all the rage everywhere, and immediately they were compared to the boy bands before them like New Kids on the Block. Here is Kevin at a press conference explaining why Backstreet Boys were not the next New Kids.
Even though a lot of people compared us to New Kids on the Block, that's something that we feel like set us apart is our vocals. We're a vocal group. I think New Kids on the Block were an incredible phenomena, and they had tons of success all over the world. They were great entertainers, but I think they'd be the first ones to admit that they weren't a vocal group. And that's something that we are. We're 5 singers.
Backstreet albums were selling in big numbers all over the world, though, thanks in part to working with current and future hitmakers such as Mutt Lange, Dennis Pop, not his real name, Max Martin, and PM Dawn. The American version of Backstreet Boys would eventually sell more than 13 million copies, while Backstreet's Back would sell more than 10 million copies worldwide, with half of that total coming from Europe and a cool million from Canada. Now, the entire world was celebrating Backstreet Mania. And while for the time it seemed like Backstreet Boys had the entire boy band market to themselves, a number of new boy bands began making their debuts. Lou Pearlman had another male vocal group ready to go called NSYNC. Not far behind them was 98 Degrees and LFO. Backstreet couldn't help but notice that after all their hard work convincing the music industry that they were the real deal, there were now all of these new boy bands looking to take a piece of the pie they had baked.
It is flattering to us, like how I said, but in a way it's kind of frustrating at the same time that it did take a while for us to break the doors down at radio stations, at the different music channels to play our videos and stuff. And it's like once something becomes successful, it's like every record company has to get their version of that successful thing that's happening at the time, and it floods the market and oversaturates it, and it's kind of frustrating to me. But at the same time, I think it also keeps everybody in check and keeps the quality level up because there is kind of a little competition factor.
Just as Backstreet Boys were riding high and about to embark on their first major world tour that included the U.S., the group experienced a scare when doctors discovered that Brian had a congenital hole in his heart, causing it to enlarge to dangerous proportions. The group began the Backstreet's Back tour, but took a break to allow Brian to undergo open heart surgery and spend 8 weeks recovering. When the group returned to the stage, paramedics were standing by during each concert to assist Brian if he required oxygen or suffered from any kind of health complications. Things weren't about to get any better for Brian. He discovered there were massive discrepancies in what the band earned and what they were paid by their manager, Lou Pearlman. Brian pointed it out to his manager and asked him to make it right, but his request went ignored. So he hired an attorney and filed a lawsuit against Lou Pearlman and Transcontinental for misappropriation and concealment of revenues generated by the group. The suit alleged that Pearlman had only paid members of Backstreet Boys $300,000 of the $10 million they made between 1993 and 1997. Pearlman argued that he invested $3 million in Backstreet Boys upon their launch in 1993. At first, the other members questioned Brian about his motives, even asking him if he was trying to break up the band. But soon after, Howie, Kevin, and AJ would all later join Brian's lawsuit. In an interview with Yahoo, members explained how they came to recognize there was something fishy going on, with Brian saying, "I remember doing 2 sold-out European shows. I get home and I've got $88,000 in my bank account. That was more than I'd ever seen in my life, but on the other hand, why wasn't it 3 or 4 times that? Then I started doing the math. Added Kevin, Lou was taking 1/6 of everything. He was taking a 25% management commission, and he was being recouped all of his expenses. That's called triple dipping, and as a manager, it's a breach of fiduciary duty, and it's illegal. Lou was pitting us against each other. I own the name, I own the copyright, your next album won't come out. Eventually, the boys received compensation through multiple settlements, but more lawsuits would be launched. Astonishingly, Perlman would stay on as their manager. He would, however, relieve Johnny and Donna Wright as the boys' day-to-day managers. On top of all that, the group would also suffer multiple personal losses that year. Dennis Pop, who helped write and produce some of the group's biggest hits, died in August 1998 after a bout with stomach cancer. Howie's older sister, Caroline, passed away from a battle with lupus, while 2 members of Kevin's family also died. 1998 would be the hardest year in Backstreet Boys' history, but they would use this adversity to become one of the biggest artists on the planet in less than 1 year. Backstreet Boys didn't waste any time in getting back into the studio to make their next album, but just before they did, the city of Orlando honored the 5 boys for raising $250,000 in relief for the victims of a devastating tornado in the area. They were awarded the key to the city, and October 7th was declared Backstreet Boys Day in Orlando. Weeks later, they flew to Sweden to team back up with Max Martin, but the group were feeling the pressure early on in the process. Kevin would tell Elle, "We had just finally broken in the United States. This was going to be our 3rd album in Europe, but it was only going to be our 2nd album in the United States. So there was a lot of pressure, a lot of anticipation for our 2nd record." Max Martin and Andreas Carlson played them a demo for a song called I Want It That Way. It was different from the usual Backstreet Boys songs in that it wasn't an R&B style ballad or an energetic dance pop song. Instead, the song leads in with a soft guitar riff that was unlike anything else they'd done before. The boys immediately loved it. They could hear that it was a bona fide hit. There was just something about it that seemed off. Ultimately, the song doesn't really make much sense, Kevin would tell LA Weekly. There are a lot of songs out there like that don't make sense, he continued, but make you feel good when you sing along to them, and that's one of them. Part of the problem was that songwriter Max Martin, being from Sweden, primarily spoke Swedish, so English was not his first language, and so something was lost in translation. But because the song was so good, the label brought in Mutt Lange to try and rework it to make more sense. I had a chance to talk about this with Howie D. Before I get to that, here's how I imagine my teenage self would have reacted to me getting to talk to a Backstreet Boy. Anyway, here is Howie telling me about how that all unfolded.
When we recorded the song, I remember after us singing it, it was like, okay, this is interesting. It doesn't make 100% sense when you listen to the lyrics, but there's a good flow to it. I wonder what's going to happen with this. And sure enough, our record label asked for us to allow Mutt Lange to come in and do a rewrite on the song. And actually, believe it or not, that song, the rewrite, is going to be on the new released Millennium record as well. That's considered one of the demos. But yeah, so anyway, so we re-recorded the song with the new lyrics that made a bit more sense. But it was so interesting how music is has a way of its own, hitting you or not hitting you. And the lyrics, nothing against the lyrics, but the lyrics actually lost the feel of the music. And so us, along with the record label, discussed it in depth and said, we're willing to gamble with this song. And even though it doesn't make 100%, sense, or most grammatically correct English, let's go with it because it has the feel. And look, lo and behold, it's our biggest song.
The group believed that everything else about the song, its potent hook, strong melodies, the different styles of arrangement, and the vocal performances from the group mattered more than a nonsensical lyric. But just in case you were wondering what the difference is between the two versions, here's my basically best friend Howie breaking it down.
It's the words. So the music was exactly the same. I think it was, instead of tell me why, it was no goodbyes. And instead of I never want to hear you say I want it that way. I think it was I love it when I hear you say I want it that way. So it definitely gave it a different bit of a twist. I mean, it made it more of like a love song for a person. But now, like I say, the ambiguous of the lyrics being so kind of out there and not knowing, it kind of leaves it up to anybody's interpretation of what they want the song to mean to them.
Howie's actually right about that. The lyrics making little sense actually become a real talking point and perhaps even a selling point for fans when the song was released on April 12th, 1999. When you sing those words, go ahead and try it, they don't really work. But isn't that part of the fun? And while people quickly picked up on the lyrical gaffe, nobody really cared. I Want It That Way felt like a different kind of boy band song. It had a maturity running through it. It had one of the most irresistible hooks ever. It had a defining opening line. You are my fire. That would make it immediately identifiable. Not to mention the refrain of Tell Me Why in the chorus. It's my go-to karaoke song for a reason, and yes, I do sing all the parts. I Want It That Way had everything going for it, which explains why it became a smash hit upon its release. It was everywhere, on the radio, on MTV, and Much Music, nonstop. It topped the charts in the UK, Europe, specifically Germany, Italy, and Switzerland, and reached number 2 in Canada, Australia, and their home away from home, Sweden. Surprisingly, I Want It That Way only reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the US, but it essentially went to number 1 on other charts like Top 40, Pop, and Adult Contemporary. The song would also earn Grammy nominations for Song of the Year, Record of the Year, and Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals. All of a sudden, Backstreet Boys weren't just a boy band. They had become the male vocal group they aspired to be. They had put out a song that legitimized their craft. A large part of the song's success was its music video. Shot at LAX by director Wayne Isham, the video featured the boys performing their new song in different parts of the airport, including outside the Tom Bradley International Terminal, which they filled with smiling and crying fans holding up signs with messages like "Kisses for Kevin" and "Nick." Fans were invited to attend the video shoot through a contest held by Kiss FM in Los Angeles. One of those fans who won, Lori Miono, would tell Billboard, "I had a suspicion that the radio host JoJo Wright was playing some sick April Fool's prank on us, but once there, we were bussed into the hangar. I can't even describe the thrill of hearing their new song for the first time in their presence. The boys were so sweet throughout, chatting, hugging, and taking pictures with fans." The video was so big in pop culture that the group have since been memorialized at LAX. If you visit the airport just outside the Tom Bradley International Terminal is a giant pillar with the faces of AJ, Brian, Howie, Kevin, and Nick, all welcoming visitors to the City of Angels. I Want It That Way would be nominated for 4 MTV Music Video Awards in 2000 and take home Viewer's Choice. That same year, it would also win them a Much Music Video Award for People's Choice Favorite International Group. But perhaps even more important than that was in how the video was parodied by Blink-182 for their song All the Small Things just a few months later. That song would become a big hit too, with a lot of its success having to do with the video, which spoofs multiple boy band videos. You may remember hearing all of that in last season's episode of Encore, where we shared the story behind that song. Within months, Backstreet Boys' humongous hit was already influencing the work of other artists, though it would take Weird Al Yankovic another 4 years to give the boys the ultimate tribute with his parody song eBay. My house is filled with this crap, shows up in bubble wrap most every day. What I bought on eBay. What an honor that must have been, and to have me sing it now.
So that one, there are a few really like heavier tunes. This one we really like it. Like we've all been kind of like, yeah, it's really catchy, the first single.
Thank you.
But there's a couple of other ones there that are a little bit harder hitting.
Yeah, right.
And so why did you choose to go with that one for the first
Saving those for later, you know. Yeah. Don't want to give everything we got at once.
I think this song is a good bridge between the last album and this album, some of the harder stuff. So it's a good bridge. Like you say, you hit them off right off from the very beginning with something too different. sometimes people are like, yeah, they like it, and sometimes if they don't like it, then they may not get the rest of the album.
Right.
It's like coming out with Backstreet's Back straight from the get-go on the last album.
Yeah.
As great of a song and as symbolic for the group, it might not have been the right choice straight off the bat. So Quit Playing Games blew up, and it's a really radio-loved record. And then that's when you come in with the knockout punch.
The knockout one.
That was the Backstreet Boys explaining to Much Music's Rachel Perry why they chose I Want It That Way as the lead single for Millennium, the second Backstreet Boys album according to Americans, and the third Backstreet Boys album according to the rest of the world. Released on May 18th, 1999, Millennium went on to sell more than 24 million albums worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums of all time. 10 million of those copies sold would come from the U.S. alone in 1999, making it the highest-selling album of that year. Critics were still skeptical of the group, but both Entertainment Weekly and Spin awarded it B- grades, singling out I Want It That Way as the bubblegum ballad of the year, and so candy it will hit your pleasure center and the pop charts. What music writers thought didn't really matter, though. Backstreet would embark on the Into the Millennium tour 1 month after the release of the album, selling out 115 shows they played in 84 international cities. To date, I Want It That Way has been streamed nearly 2 billion times on Spotify, and that was just by me, while the video has been viewed more than 1.6 billion times on YouTube. It is without a doubt Backstreet Boys' signature song, and it's never really gone away. Every now and then, it floats back into the public's consciousness when one of the members is interviewed, and of course, they are asked about the song. Or it appears on lists like Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Pop Songs of All Time, it was number 10, or Complex's 30 Best Boy Band Songs, where it came second after NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye, which I totally disagree with. I could do an entire other podcast about that. But it was also on my favorite list, the 19 Greatest Key Changes in Music History by Shortlist.com, where it was ranked number 5. I suppose Sisqo's Thong Song may have had the better key change, sure. The song was also singled out as a genre-transcending classic by Rolling Stone in its readers' poll of the best boy bands of all time. In case you are wondering, and I know you are, here is the top 5 in that poll. At number 5, NSYNC. Number 4, the Jackson 5. Number 3, New Kids on the Block. Number 2, the Beatles. Interesting move in calling them a boy band. But at number 1, Backstreet Boys. Yes, you heard it, folks. Backstreet Boys are better than the Beatles. I've always said that. But the best thing about the legacy of I Want It That Way is just how casually it appears in pop culture 10, 15, 20, even 25 years after its release. As I mentioned earlier, there was a hilarious cold open to an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where Andy Samberg's character, Jake Peralta, he has perps in a police lineup sing I Want It That Way to help a victim identify the suspect's voice.
I heard him. He was singing along to the music at the bar.
Do you remember what he was singing?
I think it was that song, I Want It That Way.
Backstreet Boys, I'm familiar. Okay. Number 1, could you please sing the opening to I Want It That Way?
Really? Okay.
Naturally, Samberg can't contain himself in the moment. It is so good. Remember Arthur, the beloved animated anthropomorphic aardvark? The video for I Want It That Way was featured in an episode where Arthur's sister DW imagined the boys as bunnies and aardvarks. A classic moment in television history. And it stole the show in Magic Mike XXL when Joe Manganiello performed a striptease to I Want It That Way in the convenience store. Cheetos and water, anyone? It has also been used to sell everything from Flamin' Hot Doritos and Chipotle to the Samsung Galaxy and Downy Rinse and Refresh, naturally. Out of nowhere, the song went viral just because Chrissy Teigen posted about it on Twitter when she was pondering what the meaning was behind it. You know, like we all have. In 2018, the supermodel and entrepreneur, she tweeted out to the universe, "I never want to hear you say, I want it that way, because I want it that way." He doesn't want to hear it because he is the one that wants it that way. He wants to be the one to say it. Also, what is it? It seems they both want it the same way, but are fighting over who gets to say they want it that way. Luckily for Chrissy, Backstreet Boys put her mind at ease and issued a response later that day, tweeting, "Don't want to hear you say that you want heartaches and mistakes or to be two worlds apart. We don't want you to want it that way. That's the way we want it, for you to not want it that way." Perhaps the coolest and most convincing way in which I Want It That Way proved that it transcends genres and generations came when Backstreet Boys performed their hit at the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary concert special this year.
The Backstreet Boys! Tom, Rita, come back!
The crowd was filled with comedy's biggest names like Amy Poehler, Seth Meyers, Adam Sandler, Kristen Wiig, John Hamm, Maya Rudolph, and Paul Rudd, to name a few, all of whom were singing their hearts out. And okay, Pedro Pascal wasn't singing, but the smile on his face, he was experiencing so much joy in that very moment. But most surprising was when Brian shoved the mic into Jerry Seinfeld's face and forced him to sing Ain't Nothing But a Mistake. I gotta say, that was gold, Jerry, gold! To commemorate the phenomenal success of Millennium in the summer of 2025, Backstreet Boys will be taking their show to the state-of-the-art Sphere venue in Las Vegas. There, they will present their music as a visual spectacle and make it an immersive experience while taking their fans on a trip down memory lane by performing the Millennium album and fan favorites. In addition to that, they're also re-releasing the album as Millennium 2.0, featuring additional tracks, including the long-awaited alternate version of I Want It That Way, otherwise known as No Goodbyes. So finally, people will be able to hear the official and correct version of I Want It That Way and truly decide which way they actually want it. But I have a feeling I know which way it's going to go. I'm Ruby Carr, and you've been listening to Encore and the story of Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way. Thank you so much for listening. New episodes every Thursday, so make sure you like and subscribe. Do we still say that on podcasts?
Encore is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Download the free iHeartRadio app and subscribe.